Now I'm pleased to introduce you to our presenters for today's webinar. Risa Wilkerson is Executive Director of Healthy Places by Design. She provides overarching guidance and strategic vision to fulfill the organization's mission of advancing community action and proven place-based strategies to ensure health and well-being for all. Risa brings experience coaching and providing technical assistance to multidisciplinary partnerships across the country. She combines her knowledge of nonprofit management, coalition building, community assessment, and systems approaches to address social determinants of health. Risa holds a Master of Arts degree from Michigan State University. Shelby Woodward has been the Violence Prevention Coordinator at the Wyandotte County Public Health Department since 2023. While Shelby believes that nearly everything could be or is violence prevention, she mainly focuses on coordinating the violence prevention priority area of her community's CHIP, or Community Health Improvement Plan. She facilitates which facilitates Kansas's only county level youth fatality review and recommendations committee. She also coordinates a gun lock distribution program, and in her words, enjoys generally yapping with community partners about what she calls relationship building if her bosses ask. Shelby was born and raised in the Kansas City metro area. She attended the University of Missouri and spent the beginning of her career in public health education and direct social services. She began working in Wyandotte in 2018 as an AmeriCorps Vista and never left. Just recently, she became the sixth generation of her family to live in KCK, and this gives her a lot of credibility to Wyandotte Countyans. Charlene McGee is Director of Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion at the Multnomah County Health Department in Oregon. As principal investigator, and as a highly effective systems thinker, Charlene executes successful high-impact strategies across a broad public health portfolio, including chronic disease, injury and violence prevention, substance use prevention, immunization, and addressing racial health disparities. Charlene champions sustainable change and significantly reduces disparities by forging multi-sectoral partnerships with a grant portfolio that consistently promotes social cohesion and cultural preservation as essential solutions. Charlene holds a Bachelor of Science degree from Oregon State University and an executive master's degree in public administration from Portland State University. So you can see we have an all-star lineup of presenters for you today. And so without further ado, I will hand it over to Risa.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and welcome everybody. We're glad to have you here with us. I am very pleased to share with you today a high-level overview of Healthy Places by Design's newest resource called Building Safe, Active, and Connected Communities for Youth and Young Adults. We developed this resource as an action guide because youth and young adults face high rates of community violence, which harms physical and mental health and limits safe opportunities to be active and connected. In fact, violence is a leading cause of death for young people in the United States. It's the leading cause of death for those ages 10 through 24. Homicide is the second leading cause of death. And for young adults ages 25 through 34, it is the third leading cause. So this guide builds on two Centers for Disease Control's resources. One was focused on community violence prevention, and the other on efforts to improve safe places for physical activity for youth and families. Only evidence-based strategies and approaches that are well aligned with both were considered for inclusion. We also partnered with Prevention Institute, who contributed additional resources to this work. It's really important because when public places are both safe and welcoming, people are more likely to use them for exercise and connection. So because of this, preventing violence and creating violence-free community settings is essential, again, for both physical and social health. Now, while we developed the guide in partnership with Prevention Institute, we also consulted with multiple public health practitioners, researchers, youth, and community leaders from diverse communities across the country, ensuring the inclusion of those who have direct lived experience with community violence. The purpose is to help public health practitioners, advocates, government leaders, and community members prevent community violence while improving safe places for physical activity and social connection with the lens of youth and young adults. Our focus is on community violence in public places, so streets, parks, and similar locations, and on environmental and social strategies tied to physical activity. Our scope did not include strategies and approaches related to policing or firearm policy, although these are acknowledged and they are definitely important. So now I'd love to, we also wanted to share with you our guiding principles. And so as we went through and created these recommendations, we kept these four in mind. Solutions that solve many problems are powerful. So we used multi-solving approaches, those that can address multiple things at one time. We also recognize that complex problems do require a full range of partners. And so we recommend bringing together cross-sector partners and youth with lived experience from planning stages all the way through implementation. Community strengths advance effective solutions. And so we recommend starting from assets, not deficits, and centering residents and community-based organizations as drivers of change. And finally, we want health equity to be our North Star. So prioritize communities most harmed by historic disinvestments so that every young person has fair access to safe, welcoming spaces. Very briefly, I'd love to run through the three recommendations that we highlight in this report. And the first one, improving parks and green spaces for safe physical activity. These are essential to healthy communities. They give people places to be active, connect with nature, and spend time with others, all of which support physical, mental, and social well-being. We also know that parks strengthen local economies, reduce pollution, improve air and water quality, and help lower rates of violence and crime. So we recommend designing parks and green spaces specifically to improve health and safety. And to do this, meaningfully involve those who are most affected by community violence, especially people who feel unsafe or excluded from these spaces. Women and girls, for example, often report feeling unsafe or unwelcome in parks due to harassment or lack of input in design decisions. And design features such as better lighting, lower hedges, and multiple exit routes can help. It's also important to ensure access to parks, so work with your transportation departments, your active transportation advocates, and community members to ensure that people can more easily get to these spaces. And finally, complement the design of parks with programs that support health and safety. Consider those that encourage walking or biking in groups to help people feel safer and more supported, and make it more easy for people, especially youth, to be active as part of their daily routines. Programs like Safe Routes to School help prevent community violence and increase physical activity among students by putting more eyes on the street and creating trusted routines and relationships. Some communities hire local community members as safe passage workers to help de-escalate conflict and report potential threats. Our second recommendation is to improve public spaces for social connection. Again, promoting social connection in public spaces is an effective way to support both community safety and physical activity. Well-designed social spaces, as well as policies that make it easier for people to host events or gather informally, all help build stronger relationships. These connections create a shared sense of responsibility for keeping the community safe and healthy. So, recommendations include designing and activating third places like plazas, libraries, community centers, and more, so that people can gather, play, and connect on a regular basis. Features such as comfortable seating, gathering and play areas, and multi-generational programming can deepen relationships and make parks feel like true community hubs. Remediating vacant lots and supporting community-led placekeeping, art, and events that honor local culture and transform neglected spaces into safe, vibrant hubs is also a recommendation. Community cleanup days are a great way to bring people of all ages together, to work together side by side and take pride in their neighborhood. And again, promoting policies that strengthen social connection, like permits for block parties or specific zoning to increase the number of third places and community spaces, is helpful. And our third recommendation is around investing in youth employment to improve community conditions. Youth, jobs, and training programs can reduce young people's exposure to violence, lower overall violence, build important life and work skills, and connect youth with caring adults while also providing income for families. Many sectors can create employment opportunities for young people, including government agencies, nonprofits, community coalitions, schools, and businesses. Employing youth in leadership roles that improve community conditions is a multi-solver strategy. You can work on park maintenance, vacant lot stewardship, events, peer outreach, and advisory councils. By compensating young people for these roles, it helps to build their civic skills, strengthen relationships with adults, and signals that their ideas are valued. We recommend you ensure living wages, mentoring, and safe, affordable transportation so all youth can fully participate and benefit. And treating them as true partners, not tokens. Use a positive youth development approach, center their strengths, support skill building, and recognize their contributions. These are all key protective factors against community violence. And finally, there were some strategies and approaches that cut across all three recommendations. These include things like equitable and sustained funding, really looking at the equity of these investments across differing neighborhoods, and making sure that you build long-term budgets for building and maintaining parks, green spaces, lighting, transportation access, etc., especially in communities that have been disinvested in previously. Participatory budgeting and flexible funding, residents and small community-led groups often have little voice in how public dollars are spent and face hurdles accessing funding. So we recommend that you use these strategies to help simplify grant processes so that grassroots organizations can lead solutions. And then finally, ensure there is lighting on streets, in parks, and at transit stops. Remediate and repurpose vacant lots and pair these improvements with community-led stewardship and programming. Our call to action to you is to share this guide with your partners and start a conversation within your network. Convene a cross-sector group with youth leaders to map local spaces where safety, activity, and connection intersect, and identify a few concrete changes to pursue this year. Fund or expand a youth employment or youth advisory role tied to community safety, and make community safety an integral aspect of your work, from policy to funding decision, program design, and data and evaluation. And with that, I am very pleased now to invite Shelby Woodward to join us. Shelby?
All right, can everyone hear me? Awesome. Thank you, Risa and Joanne, for having me here today. Really excited to talk a little bit about what our community is doing, and how we kind of work through some of those strategies that Risa just talked about. Okay, so I'm gonna lay the land for Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas, and also what makes some of our initiatives so successful. So starting with Kansas City, the top right picture shows you what most people think of when they think of Kansas City. That is the Kansas City, Missouri skyline. But this photo is actually taken from the Kansas City, Kansas neighborhood of Strawberry Hill, which is across the state lines, across the rivers. Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri have really interesting but completely different histories. And KCK was founded as, a lot of different things. It was founded by former slaves who were coming across the river from Missouri into Kansas. Parts of it were that Quindaro bit on the top right of the map. It was also settled by displaced indigenous peoples. So the Huron Wyandotte, who are like from the Great Lakes region, and then the Delaware, who are from like the Delaware River region. And then it was also settled by immigrants from Eastern Europe. We have a neighborhood here in KCK called Russian Hill. We have a large like Eastern European population. We also have a large Central and South American population here in Waco. And so it's led to our county being one of the most diverse and really interesting communities in the country. You can see on that map that Missouri kind of surrounds it on the north and east, and then Johnson County on the south. And Johnson County is one of the wealthiest counties in the country, which is a really interesting difference with Wyandotte County and Johnson County, and the fact that we have one of the most diverse, but not necessarily the wealthiest county in Kansas, not even probably in the lower like third. And then right below it, we have Johnson County, one of the wealthiest in the entire country. And then on the west, you can see Leavenworth County, which is mostly rural. But another interesting part about our community is that in our public schools, in the Kansas City, Kansas public schools, over 70 languages are spoken. Our population has a really interesting mix of demographics. So about 35% are Hispanic Latino, 36% are white non-Hispanic, and then 20 plus percent are Black. So we've been able to, this is a benefit in our community to have such a diversity of experiences, of histories, and experiences. Okay, so I'm going to briefly go over our CHA chip, what those things are. A community health assessment and a community health improvement plan are requirements for health departments for accreditation. There are also a lot of nonprofit hospitals also have to do one. As a local health department, ours is a 5-year process. So we have a new chip every 5 years. We start with our community health assessment, or what we call the CHA, though. We were able in Wyandotte County for the past 2 CHAs to utilize surveys, focus groups, town halls, and a couple of other methods to ensure that our responses were representative of the community. We asked them questions about what health means to them, where they feel like it could be improved, areas that they have the largest concern about, things that impact them and their family or neighbors. And then from that, we create our plan, our community health improvement plan. This goes beyond doctor's appointments and hospitals, what you would think of as traditional healthcare. And we look at those social determinants of health to improve health outcomes. You can see on this slide, we have a wide variety of lead agencies. We have a wide variety of priority areas, each with their own lead agency, sometimes more. We utilize the collective impact model with the public health department as the backbone support. And then we have our 5 priority areas with lead agencies. In violence prevention, you can see it's like the 4th one with the hands overlapping. That one has a couple of different lead agencies. We know that violence, it's all intersected. Different kinds of violence intersect. And so we wanted to be able to have lead agencies who have a specific knowledge and interest in the strategy set that they are working on. So each of our strategies, there's 4 different strategy sets. Each of those are strategies that go across the social ecological model. Goodness, say that 5 times fast. And across the different levels of prevention. One of our lead agencies is MOXA, which is the Metropolitan Organization Countering Sexual Assault, and they are the rape crisis center in the metro area for Kansas City. They lead this coalition, this violence prevention coalition called WICO Violence Prevention Coalition, and they sometimes, if I mess up and call it WICO-SAP, it used to be the Sexual Assault Prevention Coalition. So those 2 things are the same, interchangeable. So if I do mess up a little bit and say WICO-SAP, please forgive me. But they focus on a couple of different strategies within our CHIP, mostly norms change, built environment changes, and then increasing awareness for violence prevention, evidence-based trainings and education. I want to credit a lot of the work that I'm going to talk about to MOXA and this coalition. They're responsible for a lot of the examples that we'll share today, and they do a really great job of not only including local government, service providers, residents, neighborhood groups, but also youth. So I just want to give a little bit of a lay of the land about what we're going to be talking about today in Wyandotte County. So for our built environment strategies, we focus on a tool, we utilize a tool called CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. Notice that the first word is crime. This was originally founded or originally by and for law enforcement officers to look at their environments and identify areas that they have historically seen issues with crime in neighborhoods. We also talk when we're talking about violence prevention or when we're talking about crime versus violence, we regularly say not all things that are criminal are violent and not all things that are violence are criminal or are crimes. And so we don't focus too much on the technical crime prevention, but we focus on lowering the chances of violence occurring in neighborhoods or in around schools or in public places, and creating safer communities where residents will want to engage safely in public spaces. So I just want to go through a couple of the photos real quick and briefly talk about how those things are part of CPTED strategies. Joanne, if you could just go back one more time. Sorry about that. So in this top right, it's a ribbon cutting. We got some money to put in benches in multiple parks across our county. And this allows the elderly, it allows parents with young children, but who also maybe have older children to be able to relax and sit and watch their kids play in a park. And so it encourages that positive use of space. The second one is a blight reduction and community art project in one of our local parks. This building can't be torn down, so we wanted to make it less of an eyesore. And you can see here that they were hosting regular yoga classes or in front of this. So it went from a big empty field with a random building that we can't abate to a practical use of space that encouraged using that big empty field. And then on the bottom, Wyandotte County tries to focus or has tried to improve the number of trails that they have for active transportation, like biking or walking. So this was just an example of that and utilizing all of the abandoned bridges in our community. Okay, so the people at MOXA would regularly host CPTED trainings for community members, for organizations that live in the area. And we have regularly done that in this area. This is called Jersey Creek. You can kind of tell that there's like a concrete divot that goes across the entire screen below Parallel Parkway. That is called Jersey Creek. There are tons of trails around it. You can kind of identify on the map that there are multiple churches. Just south out of frame is one of the best high schools in the state of Kansas called Sumner Academy. So we have a couple of schools around here, a couple of churches. There's Boys and Girls Club, 2 parks. So this is has a lot of potential for being a really positive neighborhood where people are out walking, getting to know their neighbors, utilizing their parks. And for the most part, it has been used that way. And also, there are always going to be some issues in areas like this. On the far left, the north-south street that is on the far left is called 13th Street. And up top, in that top left area, you can see Jersey Creek, but you can also maybe see a trail right below it that crosses 13th Street. There is actually a tunnel that goes under 13th Street. When some of our residents and community providers in Wyandotte County, they were going through the CPTED training, and part of that is doing an assessment in the area around where you're being trained. And so a couple of our partners were walking along this trail and were about to go under the tunnel when kids up on 13th Street called down to them and said that it wasn't safe, that there's no lighting, that there are needles down there, that you can't see anything, so you don't know who's down there. And it was just generally identified that it wasn't a safe place or it wasn't a safe part of the trail to utilize. Some of these partners were with the 2020 movement, which was 20 miles and 20 miles of trails, 20 miles of hiking in by 2020. So it was a encouraging active transportation. We had a church, we had Parks and Rec, we had one of the neighborhood groups that were all a part of this group. And so they worked and partnered with youth from KC United Sports to identify additional improvements to this trail. So on the right, those pictures are the youth from KC United Sports who are helping to identify areas of improvement in this park. And they identified not only improvement to that trail, to that tunnel by improving lights, but they also identified some art in the park and improvements to the 16th Street basketball court, which is now the Broderick Crawford basketball court. So with help from community organizations and from youth in the community who live in this neighborhood, we were able to apply for some funding to improve the lighting in the 13th Street tunnel. Also, as one of our strategies for built environment in our CHIP, we wanted SEPTED to be an accessible tool for neighbors so that they know, because they know their neighborhoods the best. We wanted this to be a physical resource with plain language that is really easy to follow and can help go from understanding the built environment to solving some of the problems that they see in their neighborhood and being able to use their green spaces, their public spaces in a positive way. So Moxa and the WICO VPC produced this toolkit to help explain SEPTED concepts in layperson's terms. On the second slide, you can see an explanation of the principles. Instead of using wording like territorial reinforcement or natural surveillance, they asked questions and explained what they meant by natural surveillance or territorial reinforcement or maintenance or those kinds of things. On the right, you can see some of the questions. This is typically a physical copy, so people could go in once they're doing an assessment of their neighborhood and circle the answers to these questions. So it can be, I think even just using the first one, do the streetlights work? This toolkit will maybe prompt you to look up and say, oh no, this streetlight doesn't work. Maybe that's why this corner feels so unsafe. And then another slide page that's not included on this slide is the solutions page. And that has the solutions for some of the problems that are listed in like the questionnaire. So if the streetlights don't work, how do you get that fixed? You call 911, or I'm sorry, 311. You write down the number of the streetlight that doesn't work. There's a little badge on all of the streetlights. And then you keep the reference number so that you can call back and contact them and ask them when it'll be fixed, if it's fixed, that kind of thing. This toolkit was initially used by neighborhood groups, but a teacher at one of the local high schools found it through just working with community members. And thought that it would be perfect for her class that was about civic and community engagement. So if you want to go to the next slide. Perfect. And so she went through the entire toolkit with her class, and then they decided that they were going to do an assessment of the area around their high school. So you can see on the left side, right in the middle, is the high school. And then I just wanted to point out a couple of the other things. You can see that this is on the right, is a pretty busy road, and that it's all residential around there. So the youth did this assessment near their school, and right at about 22nd and Steele, so like the bottom left middle area, they identified a really big concern. They saw that there was an intersection that was downhill from a really busy street. So from the really busy street on the right, going down Steele Road, that's all downhill, and that people were just zooming past it. There is a crosswalk here, but there was no stop sign. And so when cars are going at an accelerated speed from a relatively busy street, it was frightening for some of the kids who were doing the assessment around their school. And so they identified that as a problem. They went through the toolkit and the solutions in the back of the book, and they worked with Public Works to install a four-way stop sign at that intersection. So you can see in December of 2023, no stop sign. There is a sign on one of the for one way that there's a crosswalk, but not the other. And then in February 2026, you can see that it's a four-way stop sign. You can see the stop signs, and the crosswalk is more clear on this side. So those are just a couple of examples. I know that the Jersey Creek example is in the action guide with mention of this one, but I just wanted to briefly mention this one and the importance of youth being involved in this entire process. So thank you so much for allowing me to share some of our examples in Wyandotte County.
Shelby, thank you so much. It is very impressive what has taken place there, and that you have had youth involved is so inspiring. Now we'd like to bring Charlene McGee to the stage, and looking forward to hearing from you, Charlene.
Thank you. So as it was shared, my name is Charlene McGee, and I have the privilege of working as Multnomah County's Director for Prevention and Health Promotion Unit. While I do hold this role, I also just want to recognize and acknowledge that I hold multiple identities. I'm a mother to a Black son, a Black immigrant, a public health professional, and along with my titles, I bring both my lived and professional experience, which are also essential to this work alongside our community's wisdom. Next slide, please. So for our work, and I mean, all the work that we are all doing, we recognize that data is part of the story. We know that the data represents individuals who are in or have been essential part of our community. While we do speak about the data, we also want to humanize the data, recognizing that the impact for which we are speaking about is really not to blame an individual, is really focus on systems, the built environment, and disinvestment that have occurred. And while our presentation may focus on disparities, we also want to recognize that there's tremendous community resilience that prevents worse outcomes within our community. Next slide. So Multnomah County is Oregon's smallest area by county, but we are the most populous with over 800,000 residents, including both the cities of Portland and Gresham. Multnomah County also remains the state's younger, the state's younger among 12 different counties. Our diversity is shown by the fact that 14% of our residents are born in another country, 20% speak a language other than English at home, and our Hispanic and Latino population makes up about 11.4% of the county, and they do represent our fastest growing ethnic group. In terms of racial representation, Multnomah County represents 77% white, 7% Asian, our Black community, and other groups. Next slide, please. So our approach is guided by three essential themes. The first one being that we do hold the core belief that gun violence is preventable, and all forms of violence are made more dangerous when guns are involved, and contributing to these numbers. Gun violence is a public health crisis at its core and at its root. Secondly, it is imperative that our strategies lead with race and prioritize communities most impacted. This is non-negotiable. As our work at the peak of the data that sort of spurred the work that I'm going to speak about, we had record-breaking year in 2021 and 2022. So again, this was around the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw record-breaking numbers both in Portland and Gresham. During that time, more than half of our victims were people of color. In Portland's Black community, which is less than 6% of our city's population, represented about 40% of those killed by guns. We are glad to note that communities in Portland and Multnomah County are currently seeing reduced incidents, and we are also seeing downward trends in most of the county, except in Gresham, which the number seems to be holding steady. But it's also just important to just recognize the downward trend that we're seeing overall. Third, responding to this crisis requires intense collaboration and coordination across the full spectrum of strategies, especially as public safety systems face trained resources and workforce shortage. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights how our public health approach deliberately work across systems to become a true driver for health equity, using initiatives like Our People's Farmers Market and Reclaiming Black Joy as examples. These strategies shift the focus from individual behaviors to system factors and recognizing how the social determinants of health shape health outcome. Community empowerment is central and pillar to our work, recognizing and acting on youth in our community as key players. Our goal is to uplift historically marginalized voices by prioritizing youth autonomy and agencies to address root causes. We are also unapologetic about compensating youth as experts in the voice in which to bring to this work. So we invest in them as subject matter experts, compensating them as consultants for their skills and talents to enhance engagement. We also collaborate with health systems and other partners to ensure that compensation provides tangible workforce development, moving beyond non-ideal methods, beyond just gift cards. We also recognize youth leadership. Youth are part of our planning, as you'll get to see and hear a little bit about the work that they're doing within our farmers market, using e-bikes and social media for engagement and outreach effort. We recognize that this paid involvement is a direct violence prevention strategy, fostering agency and independence. Secondly, recognizing our strategic collaboration. Change is driven through multi-sectoral partnerships, build on trust and shared power. We work with health systems, school, culturally specific organization, our local law enforcement and public safety entities to ensure that strategies are culturally specific and directly meet community needs. We also are intentional about including inclusion and equity with our work. So while events, activities, such as being titled as Reclaiming Black Joy, they are explicitly and intentionally open to all, and recognizing that the diverse representation of our county. We underscore that and really recognize and uplift that equity and racially and culturally specific work also benefits us all. Within our farmers market, again, at the Reclaiming Black Joy, our vendors include farmers from Burma, Mexico, India, and several African countries. And then third, with the upstream systems focus, we target social determinants of health by focusing on upstream strategies, addressing structures, barriers like housing, livable wages, and built environment. And at these efforts, we have partners who provide a range of different resources. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights community safety headlines in the news. It requires us to really work at the intersectionality of the work, specifically how the built environment, traffic fatalities, and violence contribute to the mental health impact like anxiety, depression, fear, and high ACEs score within our community. I invite you to pause and take a moment as you read through the headlines, reflecting on what is occurring locally, compounded by national news that occur within that time. This vulnerability is rooted in centuries of systemic racism. We know that gentrification and forced displacement have pushed many Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color in our families from historic North and Northeast Portland into East Portland, Gresham, and other mid-county places. We're actually now seeing even further displacement beyond Gresham into what the community referred to as the numbers. The fragmenting of communities and undermine social cohesion, maintain the inequitable availability of self-determination. This divide has shaped these areas into environments that are vulnerable and conducive to multiple forms of violence, including community violence, hate violence, youth violence, intimate partner violence, bullying, and ACEs that we know disproportionately impact our communities of color as well. These headlines and the data shared are part of the toxic stress contributing to chronic disease disparities we see so rampant locally and nationally. Community members are concerned about their right of way and safety concerns, which we also have to note serves as a deterrent to efforts to encourage and promote increased physical activity like walking and biking. This anxiety is captured in actual statements from community members, which, as you can see from the slide, where a community member highlighted and texted me that just sharing their concern about being encouraged to go outside. Next slide, please. So community safety is a core public health issue, not solely a criminal justice concern. It determines if individuals will be able to feel safe, being able to move, connect, learn, work, live, and work without chronic stress. When we talk about violence prevention, we have to be clear that it is a core public health issue and not just a matter of law enforcement or community safety. Public health is about ensuring the well-being of our entire population, and we cannot achieve that if people don't feel safe to move, connect, learn, or live without chronic stress. Next slide, please. So this slide showcased prevention in action through one of our signature initiatives, Reclaiming Black Joy. This initiative is an example of creative placemaking using park for spaces of celebration and connection across our priority neighborhoods to drive collective health equity and community safety. It is about building a sense of belonging, reducing stress through positive, intentional community presence. The scale of this effort is significant. Since 2002, we have held a total of 13 events across 9 priority neighborhoods. This focused effort ensures that we are reaching the areas most impacted by violence. This work is deeply collaborative. We have successfully engaged 31 different unique community partners who help drive the event and deepen their impact. We prioritize youth as change agent, working with over 41 youth directly involved in the planning and execution of this event. We are also intentional about investing in local economies and resource connection. We partner with 23 service providers where the county directly compensate them for their service and resources depending on what's being offered to connect to residents to provide essential support alongside working with 11 food vendors who contribute to the celebration. Finally, the project demonstrates our cross-system approach through strong governance engagement involving 5 partners from the city of Portland and 13 partners from Multnomah County as well. These numbers shows that Reclaiming Black Joy is not just an event, that is collaborative by nature. So this slide represents images captured from Reclaiming Black Joy. There's artistic celebration. I also just want to call out the youth you see here with the saxophone. Michael, who's with our youth leaders, he's actually currently wrapping up his first year at a college out of state, and he was invited to perform. There's also just, again, different representation of the youth in different key and leadership role. Want to recognize below that picture with the gentleman you see with the cowboy hat. He's actually one of our current commissioner in his district. He's Commissioner Vince Jones Dixon, who actually several years ago went through a leadership program that we offered. He served on the Gresham City Council and now is currently on the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. So again, just really highlighting that true intentional community work can really lead to systemic change. And actually one of his priorities is gun violence. Next slide, please. So another example I want to highlight is the People's Farmers Market as another example of placemaking in action. So like our Reclaiming Black Joy, the People's Farmers Market is a direct public health and violence prevention strategy rooted in placemaking and youth empowerment. While event activities, are again a partner, are titled in that way, we know that this again is another example of equity benefiting us all. This is reflected in our vendors being of community members from various countries throughout the world. At the core public health impact, wanting just to recognize again the economic impact that we're seeing. We're intentional about compensating farmers who are coming in. We give out tokens to community members who come in. They redeem their tokens. We're also intentional about building the farmers' capacity to be able to receive veggie bucks and snap bucks at the farmers market. Also just wanted to highlight too that the compensation for the youth at our market, we are intentional about providing them and compensating them at $25 an hour, recognizing the need for modeling livable wage compensation as building up their skills as they move through the world. Next slide, please. So we firmly believe that investing in youth as subject matter experts represent the work. Again, collages of just different pictures. The pink and blue slide represents a spring break camp that we had a couple of years ago, where again, we compensated youth for being in there, and the youth developed these slides. And the pictures up show the youth who deliver products through e-bikes, a SEPTED project. And this group of young people are peer mentors that do direct mentorship. And then the next slide, again, just calling out, wanting to recognize that the work we do is not done alone. We have multiple partners that help to carry this out. And thank you for the opportunity. And feel free to reach out if you want to connect further.
Thank you so much, Charlene and Shelby audience. I hope that you really got a lot out of the actual community stories that we were so grateful to have Shelby and Charlene share with us today. The action guide is intended to be a resource with, some of the very quick rundown of strategies, but the community stories, as we know, that's where you hear the context, the important context. And I think you also heard from Shelby and Charlene how their efforts around violence prevention connect to so many other things and to so many other partners. So thank you both to them. We have a couple of questions and encourage the audience, if you've thought of a question for any of our presenters, you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. So the first question is from Lisa, and Lisa was already thinking about some ways to activate the community or work with the community to activate and improve public spaces. And she wondered just if either of you have strategies for working specifically with landlords or property owners who maybe are hesitant to engage or discuss options around improving public spaces.
I can actually share. I mean, I think there are a couple of factors. We're actually doing some work right now with landlords around, I mean, it is violence prevention, also ties into some other work within our unit around smoking. I think part of it, honestly, right, I think one, it depends on the state you're in. I just also want to recognize the power dynamic that we know that exists between landlord and tenants. So leading with that, depending on where you are, I think there's different levels to engage. We are fortunate in Oregon with a couple of tenant right laws that exist where we're able to leverage that and use the residents' voice to lead the conversation. There's also another organization here locally, again, they're called Community Alliance of Tenants, where they support tenants in leveraging their rights. So I think one, sort of just being mindful of what the existing laws are and seeking to engage really from a place of strength. I will also just sort of encourage based on what you're leading, right, rather than punitive, because we also learn and see that people tend to want to engage when there's sort of like that shared give and take versus feeling like it's more punitive. But definitely certainly leading with the resident's voice.
Right. Thank you, Charlene. Another question is, I think specific again to a certain type of public space or community space that one might want to improve, and that storefronts. Have any of you kind of worked through the economic angle to engage store owners or um, others in more the business sector, economic sector to try to improve community safety or have some specific strategies there?
I have
Um,
another one, but you can go, Shelby. I'll go after you.
just like a couple of things. So part of our community health improvement plan, you all saw the graphic, was that we have both safe and affordable housing and jobs and education as two of our priority areas. And so when I say that like everything is violence prevention, like I mean it. And a lot of those strategies I look at through a violence prevention lens. So we have a tenants' rights strategy set. We have a um, sorry, in our jobs and education, we focus a lot on improving the current jobs or storefronts that are available in Wyandotte County. We are also one of the hosts for the upcoming World Cup this summer. So there has been a really big push for local businesses and things like that in our community. I think that for the first question about the tenants, in addition to leading from the tenants' opinions and leading from their experiences, like Charlene mentioned, I also think that changing behavior without recognizing that they're changing behavior, like with some of our SEPTED strategies, like if there's a sidewalk, people are going to use a sidewalk. Changing behavior from like a codes, zoning, business licensing perspective makes it so that it's not punitive and it's just, this is how it is. No one's in trouble. This is just the expectation for how landlords participate in our community. As community members, you also are responsible for X, Y, and Z, just like everybody else. So that's one thing that I think that like our strategies are working on. And then from storefronts and businesses and things like that, we work with a groups called neighborhood business revitalization groups. So they're similar to neighborhood groups at like a smaller level, but they take care of a bigger area. And they work really closely with businesses. They walk around and get to know all of the businesses in their area. They not only advocate for residents, but also advocate to improve the relationship between businesses and the residents in the area. So I think they have been really, really helpful over the past couple of decades, but specifically right now, especially as we're building up our World Cup in the next month or two.
Great, that's exciting. So we have just about a minute left, but this is a question I was hoping came up. But you have a minute. I want to hear from both of you. And that is, what is your relationship with local law enforcement partners, particularly knowing that how you described the context of your community and perhaps some history of distrust and disinvestment. So, Charlene, if you want to take a few minutes
Quickly.
first to kind of describe that, and then Shelby.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll note it is a complex and necessary relationship. I'll use as an example for the Reclaiming Black Joy. Actually, before I speak to that, so we also, with our grants and different work that we have, we're sitting on multiple different committees with different law enforcement people, right? So we sort of have the opportunity to build relationship on the back end of things. And for those public facing events, I mean, we're very honest and transparent. I know the dynamics. I will say for like the Reclaiming Black Joy, when we're having it in those parks, because again, those locations are places where crime and we know violence happens. We do engage with law enforcement and ask them that if they do choose to show up, to make sure they're sending like their liaison of people who are more connected to the community to come in, not in uniform, right? They're just coming more in the non threatened way. And it's been proven to be very, very successful. I mean, there's times when they reach out around efforts very proactively to engage, but again, they understand and they recognize the complexity of what the relationship, and we are also in a role we have to hold, both community and law enforcement being government as well.
Shelby, do you want to share your partnership in Wyandotte County with law enforcement partners?
Yeah. I mean, similar to what Charlene mentioned, it can be very complicated and complex. Wyandotte County, with all of the diversity in our county, comes a lot of power struggle and different power dynamics. So there's kind of a history of distrust, a history of corruption in our community that we are currently working through and building up trust as the government and the law enforcement agencies are also trying to do that. We work with them in the most appropriate ways given the context of the situation. So sometimes that means that we invite their Hispanic community liaison to events that we know are going to be highly populated by people in the Hispanic community liaison. And sometimes that means we specifically don't invite law enforcement to those events. So it just depends on the event because ultimately we want to improve the trust between the community and the events that we're doing. And sometimes that means involvement from the back end versus being up and center.
Great. Well said. Well, thank you again so much, Risa, Charlene, and Shelby, for sharing about the Community Safety Action Guide as a resource, and then for telling the community stories that really make those recommendations and the resources come to life and practical. Folks in our audience, thank you so much for attending today. We hope you got a lot out of today's session. Remember, first of all, be on the lookout for the webinar recording to be posted on the Healthy Places by Design website next week. And here on the slide, please keep in touch with Healthy Places by Design. If there were questions that we weren't able to get to during today's webinar, feel free to email us or reach out on LinkedIn. But thank you again, everyone, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.